my teammate turned to volley the ball.
Oh, no.
She ended up missing the ball and hitting my eye. And so I dropped to the ground. I started screaming because I'm like, I'm blind. Like, there is no way that I am not blind.
Yeah.
And so I wiped and then saw that there was blood and I'm like, ah, and just everywhere.
Oh
right?
my gosh. Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of my conversation with Marsha Harper, the American University women's soccer head coach. And here we talk about her journey as a player and all of the things that led to her playing for the amazing Becky Burleigh at the University of Florida. And Marsha has some crazy injury stories, and she shares them here and some really interesting remedies that she went through to heal these injuries. I'm not going to hint at too much, but I just hope no one's hungry for sushi. I know that's such a weird hint, but you'll figure it out later. Anyway, she shares about her time as a player in college, what led her to transfer and get 2 more years of eligibility. So she got to play until she was almost 25 years old. So Marsha talks about then her journey to coaching, and although she said that it was never really in the cards for her initially, she talks about the importance of all of the people along her journey that helped her to her different opportunities as a coach. So she coached at 5 different programs before landing at American. So we're talking USF, Richmond, Bowling Green, Northwestern State, and the University of Massachusetts until, of course, AU. So she's got an amazing ability to connect with people and lead and mentor, and she's super humble about it, so I'm going to brag for her, but she's got a really amazing ability to do that, and she shares all about her positivity and how she has navigated some tough times in her life. So thanks for tuning into part 2. Here is the rest of my conversation with Marsha. But you mentioned that you transferred, so you had this awesome career at Florida, playing for this amazing coach, had a lot of success there. What made you transfer?
Yeah. So, I had success in different ways, right? Like, I came in, I was recruited at both schools. I laugh about this now, but I was recruited at both schools as a forward, right? As a target forward. Mm-hmm. However, at both schools, I was not overly productive as a target forward, right? But of course, when you're in the moment, I was a kid that thought, man, I'm the best. Yeah. You know, like, I'm like, oh, I should be playing, right? But then ultimately at both schools, I ended up transitioning to a center back. I played also as a forward at USF, but after my first year, I was like, look, you and I both know that I'd be better as a center back, right?
No secrets here.
So I had a slew of injuries. I tore my ACL my sophomore year of high school. Oof. Devastated. I thought the world was going to end. I was like, I'm just now starting to get all this attention, right? Like, I want to be on the national team, all of these things. And I'm like, oh no. And I had never been injured really at all at that point, but that was obviously a dramatic injury. In my head, I had told myself that it was over, and I went to
that's a peak prime time. I can relate to that. That's a prime time for recruiting future.
But fortunately, I came back and I was fine. I ended up going. But my only year at Florida that I was healthy was my freshman year. And then it was like every year was riddled with a different injury. So my sophomore year, I tore my meniscus in my other knee with like a chunk of bone. So that was a little bit more intense. I had to be
some bone with you.
Yeah, exactly. Good thing I drank milk. But that was my sophomore year. I came back my junior year, and I got into a scooter accident, like a Vespa scooter accident, which was actually my second one. The first one was my freshman year, but I wasn't really hurt. My shoulder just like slightly popped it back in, had to play in the game the next day. It's fine. But my junior year in college was a more serious scooter accident, and I ended up ultimately a car cut me off, a Toyota 4Runner, which are big cars, boxy, right?
Yes.
Cut me off, and on a scooter, it's just like a bike where if you stand on your handlebars, like brake, you will like fly over the handlebars. So I just like froze and like was stiff. He cut me off. I ended up clipping the back of his car. So that literally like stiff like this ended up going parallel. And I slid for 10 feet on the pavement. And so on my left-hand side, I had superficial or just kind of surface level wounds, right? Road rash. Mm-hmm. And then on my right big toe, I had, my skin was completely gone and my bone was showing. So, the soccer player, you use your feet. I'm right foot dominant. So I was out, needless to say, I was out that fall of my junior year.
Holy cow.
Fortunately enough, at the University of Florida at that time, there was 2 like visiting wound specialists on campus. So they actually, typically with something like that, they'll take a skin graft from a different part of your body and like put the skin there and, you know, hope that it heals. But they actually, these wound specialists used, it was like new at the time, this medicinal seaweed. Yeah. So they took the seaweed, and because I also still had some like gravel in there. So the seaweed helped like restore the tissue and like grow back my skin, but also at the same time debride the stuff that was in there.
Wow.
So, yeah, medicinal seaweed. Look it up.
Your toes like a little sushi roll.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. That's so amazing.
Yeah. So, you know, it's like.
And it healed? It healed? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it still functions. Honestly, I was just very fortunate. Like, unfortunate that I got in the accident. Fortunate that I still have my life. 1, 2.
Yes.
Fortunate that my toe literally still bends, still does, you know, it's everything normal. But yeah, so that was fall of my junior year. I came back thanks to the wound specialist. The spring of that same year, at the time, right, I had transitioned to a center back, right?
Yeah.
And so at the time, in the spring, we went down to play the University of Miami, which is like 4 hours away from Gainesville, Florida, where UF is. I was a center back at this point. Miami went to throw the ball in. One of my defensive center midfielders, the ball went over her head, and she turned. I always like joke and say that I was recruited because of my ability to head the ball, and nothing else. But so naturally, I really enjoyed heading things. So even if it was like in an awkward height, I would go to head it.
Yeah.
So, you know, normally you had things that are like here and above. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it was kind of hovering in this awkward height area. So I went like this.
Uh-huh.
My teammate turned to volley the ball.
Oh no.
And she's like me, like has some power, but size, right? So she ended up missing the ball and like hitting my eye. And so I had her foot connected just smack right here. And so I dropped to the ground. I started screaming because I'm like, I'm blind. Like there is no way that I am not blind. Yeah. And I'm naturally when I played very sweaty. So I'm like, and so I wiped and then saw with my other eye that was not kicked that there was blood. And I'm like, and just everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
Start screaming. It was just the crazy thing. Anyways, I ended up having, it was called an orbital blowout. So there's a bone that sits right here in your orbital socket, right? That went down and broke. Fortunately, my eye did what it was supposed to do and like puffed up so that my eye literally didn't come out of my face. And then there's a bone here that went like that. So I had to wait for the swelling to go down, and then I had double vision for 2 weeks, and I had cosmetic surgery. Fun fact.
Wow.
So,
fun fact.
Yeah, you wouldn't know, right?
Looks great. You look great.
Yeah. So there's at the time the doctor said that they could either go in under my eyelid, but there's a chance that my eye would droop. I was like, well, no.
So next option.
The other option, yeah. And then he said that they could go through my gums, cut a hole, and then drill a hole through my cheek and like fix it that way. So they did that option.
Wow.
Now that was my junior year. After that, at the end of the season, we all had individual player meetings. I sat down with Becky, Vic, and Alan, the coaches, and they were like, listen, we love you. I'm like, thank you.
And I'll be leaving now. That's all we have.
Yeah. No, they're like, however, at the time there was a bunch of people on the roster, and literally in each position there was like 5 to 6 people that you would have to beat out, even for like the right center back spot, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So they're like, you have 1 year left.
You're like, right. Thank you for the reminder.
Yeah. They're like, since you've been here, you've been healthy for 1 year. I'm like, yeah, I know. They're like, you should just like have no expectations. Probably it's going to be very hard for you to step foot on the field, right? Because you're going to have to come back from this. And then as you're doing that, other people are climbing the ladder. And
yeah.
And they're like, now we want you to stay here. And I'm like, at the time I was a bonehead kid. So I'm like, no, you don't know who you recruited. Like, I want my release papers, all these things. And, I'm glad that I did, because I was able to get I transferred my true senior year. So my first year at USF South Florida was my senior year. Mm-hmm. And then I had 2 additional years, one for my knee injury. And then I was able to get one for the scooter accident.
Wow.
Yeah. At that point I was, I think 24, 25. And,
that's awesome. That's a dream.
Yes. However, I also at that point had a few knee surgeries. And so I literally was like, I'm running on fumes here.
Yeah.
And so I was granted that, and I ended up having to get these like injections in my knee called Synvisc. So it's like essentially the way that the doctors describe it is like a fake jelly that fills in that cavity where your knee is, because I didn't have cartilage really left anymore. And so I was able to play my 6th year.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So
you have some of the most interesting recovery remedies from your injuries.
I mean, it's certainly been a ride. Yeah. So, but now, I didn't know at the time going through all that, but certainly COVID is unprecedented, but there's so many things that have happened that it's like, listen, this is what it is. Am I alive? Yes. Okay.
Check that off the list.
Yeah. So it's like, now how long, and we've been talking to our team actually about this in some capacity, because it is tough right now. Like you're training for something that is the unknown, which is really hard for us as a human. So it's like, let's acknowledge that. We all acknowledge it as hard, but like, how long are we going to sit with this perceived obstacle? Because it is perceived, right? Like how long, you can feel sorry for yourself. It's natural. But how long are you going to sit there? Like that's not going to benefit you. So same thing, like all these injuries.
Yeah.
Right? All right. Yeah, this, it's unfortunate that it happened, but like what's next?
Yeah.
Right? Like we have to keep moving. So, anyways, that's the playing career. And then, I mean, ultimately, sadly, the 12-year-old Marsha's dream of playing for the national team and professionally, at that point, my body was like, look, girl, we did it for 6 years for you. Not doing it anymore. So
you had a great run.
I still have been in training sometimes.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, now I feel like it's, kind of my job to hopefully try and help guide, kind of the next generation, as cheesy as that sounds, in their goals, whatever that looks like on the field, but certainly off the fields, and help shape them into, strong, confident women.
You talk about had a great run as a player, really interesting and scary injuries at times, but like you said, it really taught you way more in the lessons that you're now applying to your life. So your playing career ends and then you start on this path to coaching. And is that something that you saw for yourself all along, or kind of how did you fall into that path? Nope. You're like, nope.
Yeah. So, I honestly, Becky, when I was at Florida, had always said like, you should try coaching. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But never considered it. At USF, Denise had also said the same thing. And at the time I was getting my master's in exercise science. And so I was also interning in the weight room and thinking that I was going to be a strength coach, right? Strength and conditioning coach. Yeah. So that was like my path. That was what I thought I was going to do. And then it literally, another little anecdote here. In the 6th year, we played our rival at USF. We played UCF in PKs and we lost. So that was the end of my career. All the seniors were crying on the bus ride back. I literally was like upset, of course, but I'm like, yeah, all right, put in my my shift and what's next, right?
Yeah.
I like literally, as cheesy again as it sounds, on the bus ride back, I was literally looking out the window and just like, wow, like I know that competitive soccer for me, I'm not going to try and play professionally. Competitive soccer for me is over. And so now what do I do? Right? Like I know that I'm on this path to get my master's to become a strength and conditioning coach, but I'm like, soccer's always been there. And it's been like a tool for me to grow as a human. Yeah. And so I had like heard Becky's voice whispering in my head. Yeah. And so I'm like, like maybe let me like dip my toe. The non seaweed toe.
I was going to ask.
Yeah. Let me dip my toe into these waters. And, it just came like kind of naturally. I fell in love with it. Certainly there was a lot for me to learn, especially just as a player, you just play. But then now having to, especially tactically at that point, articulate what I knew as a player to like someone else to be efficient at it and like good at it was like the biggest challenge, especially as a young player, especially as a young coach, to try and fresh out of college. Like, okay, I just finished that. Like, how do I help you? How do
Yeah.
I communicate that? So
Yeah.
I think that was my biggest area of growth. But yeah, it was through a series of networking really that I was fortunate enough to literally just hop into it.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, talking about your networking, and this was going to be my next question, and just looking at your path of the assistant coaching roles that you've had, and now this being your first head coaching job, but it sounds like you've had so many mentors along the way, whether you're a player or now a coach. So I kind of want to know and understand like the importance to you of having mentors, no matter what field you're in.
yeah, I mean, again, I was blessed to right off the bat, the women that I played for be my biggest mentors. That's like, not always the case for some student athletes. Like they don't have that relationship with their coach, right? And so that's tricky. And then some people like hope to find that a year, couple years, especially when you're younger, like try and find like an older person that you can like ask questions to, and you just hope that they like then take you under their wing.
Yeah.
So I already kind of was blessed to have that built in with both of my coaches, and like that's super rare. And again, that's why I'm so blessed to have had that I feel like I have to try and do that for other people. I learned early it's, like you said, it's my first head coaching job, but certainly as an assistant, I am going to work for someone that I enjoy being around.
Yeah, because you're gonna be around them a lot.
You're gonna be around them a lot. You're gonna be working long hours. You're gonna sometimes asking you to do challenging things. You're gonna be frustrated. But if you know that this person is like genuinely a good person and like you have a connection, you know that they have your best interests at heart, then like you're gonna again run through a wall to do whatever it takes to be successful, to help them be successful, to help the program be successful.
Yeah.
And so that was like, I think one of the biggest things as an assistant that I personally, in terms of professionally, learned for myself.
Yeah.
And then, every coach that I worked for along the way certainly added a little tactical thing in my toolbox, know, and it was really cool to see their perspectives on how they viewed the game and how they then articulated that to their team. So mentorship is super important. I think it's easy for me because I'm an extrovert, right? And I can talk to a tree. But I think if people can just like, and we're forcing our team to do it right now. At the end of every month, they have to reach out to someone and network in their career field and like shoot them a message, say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. And it can be as simple or as intricate as they want it to be, but we're forcing them to do that. That's their homework assignment.
Yeah.
And they've gotten some like Zoom calls, they've gotten some internships, like, wow. So it's just like, even if it's like through email, great. No, but networking is so important. I think as soon as people can learn that and then get outside their comfort zone, if it's not something that they're comfortable with, then do it. Even being an extrovert, of course, there was things that I was uncomfortable with, and still learned, whether it was advocating for myself or someone else, or bringing up an issue, like all those things. So anyways, networking is so important. And even if it's uncomfortable, like either you do it or someone is going to like jump over you.
Yeah.
Talk about sports and being a competitor. It's like, you can stay where you are and like be comfortable and like hope that someone reaches out.
Yeah.
But if they don't, then someone is going to jump over you.
And it's those real realities of transferring into the real world after being an athlete, especially part of a team sport where you're like, we're all in this together. We're all working together. Right. And then like all of a sudden you're in the real world. It's like every man for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, guys, head on over to part 3 where Marsha talks about all of the amazing things that her team is doing off of the field, including joining the fight for racial equality and opening up the conversation about mental health. And Marsha shares some really important advice on how to stay positive during really difficult times. So be sure to check out the rest of my conversation with Marsha in part 3.